Qatari foreign ministry at the center of the negotiations. And the Israel-Hamas war becomes a local issue. Protesters demand their city councils pass resolutions that could pressure the Biden administration to act. They can't go meet with Joe Biden. They can't get 2 minutes in front of the Congress. They can come to their local city council, and that's why they're doing it. And the fight over immigration intensifies as House Republicans continue the process of impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Kathy Paul Anderson and Melanie George Smith. Cunard is a proud supporter of public television. On a voyage with Cunard, the world awaits. Abundant flavor, diverse destinations, and immersive experiences. A world of leisure and British style. All with Cunard's White Star service. The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Welcome to the NewsHour. The U.S. has moved closer tonight to retaliating for a drone attack that killed 3 American troops in Jordan. President Biden said today he has decided how to respond. As he left the White House this morning, he said Iran shares the blame because U.S. officials believe an Iran-backed militia launched the attack, but he stopped short of saying that Tehran is now a target.
I do always respond to the responsible defense against supplying the weapons to people of Israel. I don't think we need a wider war in the Middle East. That's not what I'm looking for.
Later, the Iraqi militia blamed for the attack announced it's suspending strikes against U.S. forces in the region. The Pentagon responded saying, quote, actions speak louder than words. Meantime, in the occupied West Bank, surveillance video showed Israeli commandos inside a hospital in the city of Jenin, disguised as civilian women and medics. 3 Palestinian militants were killed. And in southern Gaza, fighting raged again around Khan Yunis, while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ruled out any military withdrawal.
I hear sayings about all sorts of deals, so I want to make it clear. We will not end this war without achieving all of our goals. We will not pull out the IDF from the Gaza Strip, and we will not release thousands of terrorists.
For his part, the leader of Hamas said he will meet with mediators in Cairo to review the latest ceasefire proposal. We're joined now by our own Nick Shipman. So Nick, let's start with the attack that killed those 3 U.S. soldiers in Jordan. What more do we know about how the administration is planning to respond?
Administration officials say that the challenge is to reestablish deterrence against these Iranian-backed groups without going to war with Iran itself. So what could that look like? And what I'm about to describe are kind of the broad categories of targets. A group of targets number one is Iranian-backed groups in Iraq and Syria. So these are Iraqis and Syrians who fight for these groups whose weapons, intelligence, and financing often comes from Iran. The second category is Iranian assets in Iraq and Syria. Now, what's the difference? There are Iranians from Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, that run centers in these places, that run weapon sites in these places. And these are obviously Iranians. running these places. Some of them are in Damascus and Baghdad, the capitals where these commanders fly into, but there are also more rural targets, I'm told, as well. And then the third category would be Iran itself. We're talking about everything from the IRGC headquarters in downtown Tehran to Iranian naval ships, including a ship that a former military official tells me is helping the Houthis in Yemen. So again, those are the broad categories. We don't, of course, know what the final target is going to be. But today, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby said that the response would be tiered, multiple actions over a period of time, and that suggests more than one round. They are also looking at that statement that you mentioned, by Khatib Hezbollah, most likely a group that targeted the troops in Jordan this weekend, saying that, look, we're not going to fire on U.S. troops. This is a sign, some regional officials believe, that Iran doesn't want to escalate, but a senior administration official tells me they're monitoring that statement, but they don't take it as face value. And as you said, the Pentagon saying actions.
Well, as we mentioned, Hamas announced it will go to Cairo to engage in those hostage talks. What does that signal if they're taking this seriously?
The mediators certainly hope and believe that this means Hamas is taking it seriously. And these details that we have on the hostage talks now have been provided to me by an official briefed on the talks. This is how they would unveil. The hostage releases would occur over 3 phases. Older women and children would be the first phase, men and younger women would be the second phase, and soldiers and dead bodies would be the third phase. The first phase would last 6 weeks. What does that mean? The war would actually stop for 6 weeks with assurances that the pause in the fighting would carry on to phases 2 and 3. Now, despite what you just read, Jeff, about what Netanyahu said, Israel has agreed to this framework on paper, and that's why the ball is in Hamas's court right now. That meeting is absolutely key, and will decide whether this deal goes forward. And it's all being mediated by Qatar, as we've talked about. And just a short time ago, I spoke with Dr. Majid al-Ansari, the spokesman for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Qatar, and I began by asking him how significant it was that these principles were now in place.
I can tell you that we are at a good moment now. We're at a point where our agreement have eluded us for a couple of months now. We are seeing, draft being circulated, as you saw today. Hamas announcing that they have received the draft and are discussing it, and that is a point that we were very far from a couple of weeks back. Now we have a general understanding of what the next phase of the pause will be and how that will play out, and I would say that that's very significant because as long as the process is ongoing like this, as long as we're having ideas going back and forth, we can be sure that there is a light at the end of the tunnel that we can get to a sustainable possibility.
As you said, Ismail Haniyeh today said he was going to review the draft, and he's flying to Cairo, presumably to discuss with Hamas military commanders about the draft. But Haniyeh and Hamas in general have reiterated the same point, that they want a permanent ceasefire as part of this deal, and that until that is in the deal, they will reject it. This deal does not have the word permanent ceasefire. So how do you get over, or how do you convince them to go over that concern?
Next week we've been mediating between the two sides without the United States as well, but the channel of communication. We go to understand the patterns of negotiations that they go through. Obviously, on both sides, we'll hear a lot of statements with the guys' positions on a lot of issues they forward saying that the mediation in its entirety has always been key to the process itself. So we are listening to what we are getting from both sides. We believe that the language we have right now builds upon the commitment that came from both sides during the past couple of months.
But is Hamas still insisting that the draft have permanent ceasefire?
Usually what happens is that you get the guest spot from both sides. So it depends on the side that ask them to go to come back. But I'm quite sure that we are on the right path.
We heard from the other side, so to speak, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reiterating Israel's goals of, quote, eliminating Hamas and releasing the hostages. But as we heard earlier, he said the Israeli military will not withdraw from the Gaza Strip. That's what he said today. Does that prevent the deal from happening?
I think it's very important not to take everything said in front of cameras, face value. I know we're speaking about cameras here, but there's a lot of propaganda, there's a lot of politicization of this and trying to adhere to one's motivate rather than the reality of the situation.
Let me zoom out and look at some regional issues. President Biden said today he has decided how to respond to this attack that we saw over the weekend in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. service members. Yesterday, the Prime Minister, speaking here in Washington, he urged de-escalation. What is your message to the Biden administration today as they are about to launch this threat?
I can tell you that this attack came as we all understand how dangerous it is, how problematic it is, and we, as you know, we are members in the coalition against ISIS, and therefore our military personnel are in the same operations as U.S.
Because these U.S. soldiers who were in Jordan are actually the counter-ISIS mission. That's
exactly. And therefore, we can't take this lightly, obviously, but we have to understand also the bigger picture. All of this is a byproduct of what is happening right now in this region, the Middle East. It's a cliche to say that the Middle East, is the capital of all crises in the world, but right now we are in a situation where the people in the region can't take any more refugee crisis, can't take any more security challenges, can't take any more wars. What's happening in the region right now is that you have a failure of the central state, and it's very important for us to make sure that we de-escalate. Any escalation right now in the region could result in open war. We fully understand, of course, that the United States has to re-establish the deterrence in the region, but we also are talking to our partners in the administration, our partners in our board, and we need to for any response to be measured and for us to be able to talk about this and to get the messages across on all sides.
Many U.S. officials don't believe that this is actually about Gaza. This is about Iran. Iran pushing these or supplying the information, the intelligence, the weaponry to these Iranian-backed proxies in Iraq, in Syria, and the Houthis in Yemen to be able to launch these attacks. Iran has been helping these groups. The U.S. is about to hit these groups and perhaps Iran itself. What is the off-ramp in Qatar's view for what we were about to see, increasing escalation?
Well, the important thing here is for a measured response and not to antagonize all the sides in the region for open war. While I fully understand that there is a lot of emotion also linked to this, we have to understand that when this crisis started in Gaza, this is when these escalations started, and unless we diffuse the original crisis here, unless we diffuse the war on Gaza, a lot of escalations will utilize that in the region, other parts will utilize that in the region to conduct such attacks.
Finally, sir, I will ask you about comments by Benjamin Netanyahu recently. This was leaked audio to a group of family members of hostages being held in Gaza. He said, quote, "You don't hear me thanking Qatar. They have leverage because they finance Hamas." I've asked you a version of this question before, but there are critics of yours who say you are both arsonist and firefighter. You are coming in to try and mediate today, but you are the arsonist in the sense that you're supporting Hamas. What's your response to that?
If you are going to accuse Qatar of supporting Hamas with the funding that was done to aid, then the same accusation would go to Israel itself, because all the funding that went into aid, into Gaza, was done in complete coordination with Israel. The money went through Israeli banks to make sure that we have enough calm in Gaza that we can work on mediation, and this is what we've been doing since 2006. But I can tell you that, sadly, when we hear these words coming from Prime Minister Netanyahu, the only thing we can see there is the politicization of this crisis. He has made such statements about Qatar on the eve of, and he doubled down on these statements on the eve of the meeting in Paris, when he is sending his chief of intelligence to meet with Qatar in the mediation. And while he is engaged in that mediation, if he is sincere about what he's saying in Qatar, can he answer the question of why he worked with Qatar on the funding of the aid programs in Gaza, why he's working now in the mediation, and why even on the 28th of September of last year, so just a week before the 7th of October, his government was engaged in mediation that Qatar was doing between Hamas and Israel. It's totally unacceptable, but sadly, we're well accustomed to it.
Dr. Martin, thank you very much. In the day's other headlines, former President Donald Trump will remain on the Illinois primary ballot. That state's election board declined today to remove him on the grounds that his conduct surrounding the January 6th insurrection disqualified him under the U.S. Constitution. The 8 board members, Democrats and Republicans alike, said the courts must decide the constitutional question.
this Republican believes that there was an insurrection on January 6th. There's no doubt in my mind that he manipulated, instigated, aided, and abetted an insurrection of January 6th. However, having said that, it is not my place to rule on that today.
The U.S. Supreme Court will hear arguments next week on whether Mr. Trump is ineligible for the ballot in the state of Colorado. Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush has confirmed that she's under investigation by the U.S. Justice Department. It involves allegations that the St. Louis Democrat misused campaign funds to pay for her personal security against far-right attacks. Bush denied wrongdoing today and said she's cooperating fully. A court in Pakistan convicted former Prime Minister Imran Khan today of leaking state secrets, and it sentenced him to 10 years in jail. Prosecutors said he broke the law when he waived a confidential document at a political rally. The verdict brought sharply different reactions both for and against Khan.
Look at the decision. They must have made it within the scope of our Constitution. The punishment could also have been more extreme, but it's only 10 years, so the decision was made with some thought behind it.
We all know who is honest and who are the looters who have looted this country. Imran Khan is our last hope. The whole system is trying to eliminate him.
Today's action comes days ahead of elections in Pakistan, but Khan is not on the ballot because he's already serving prison time for corruption. The government of France announced new controls on foreign food products today in response to farmer protests. They've been demonstrating for more than 2 weeks, demanding higher incomes, lower costs, and less red tape. They've used their tractors and trucks to encircle Paris with barricades, and they vowed to keep up the pressure.
I am an organic farmer. We were driven into organic farming, and today it's not working anymore. I'm selling the organic beef meat at the price of the conventional one. I run my farm, but if I don't earn money, I cannot invest. It's an economy that doesn't function anymore.
Farmers in Belgium and Spain are now saying that they are going to join the protest movement in solidarity. Back in this country, U.S. consumer confidence has reached a 2-year high. The business research group Conference Board says its confidence index rose in January for a third straight month. Analysts tie the increase to slower inflation and continued economic growth. On Wall Street, stocks mostly drifted as Federal Reserve policymakers started their latest meeting on interest rates. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 134 points to close at 38,467. The Nasdaq fell 118 points. The S&P 500 slipped 3. And this year's Gershwin Prize for Popular Song goes to singing great Elton John and his longtime lyricist Bernie Taupin. The Library of Congress announced the award today, citing hits that include Your Song, Tiny Dancer, Rocket Man, and many others. They'll be honored at a concert in Washington on March 20th. And the famed Broadway dancer, singer, and actress Chita Rivera died today in New York. Over 7 decades, she garnered 10 Tony nominations, won twice, and blazed a trail for Latina artists. Rivera first won fame in 1957 as Anita in the original West Side Story. She recalled that experience for American Masters on PBS back in 2006.
Inside of the piece was constant motion. That's what the emotion of the gangs was all about. That's what the youth of the time was all about. Movement, to keep on moving. That's why it was great to dance it and to sing. But just to sing it.
Chita Rivera was 91 years old. Still to come on the NewsHour, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, on his snubbing a meeting with the Biden campaign and his city's calls for a ceasefire in Gaza. Major car manufacturers respond to recent challenges by slowing production of electric vehicles. And author Elizabeth Flock on telling 3 women's stories of using violence to fight abuse.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The U.S. House of Representatives is on the cusp of impeaching a cabinet secretary for the first time in more than a century. Tonight, Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee are moving to advance articles of impeachment against DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Lisa Desjardins was in the hearing room and joins us now with more. So, Lisa, House Republicans have signaled that this was coming. What are their specific charges against the DHS Secretary?
Let's look at the articles of impeachment now that we have them. There are 2. The first one is willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law. That basically accuses the secretary of allowing in hundreds of thousands of migrants, not detaining them. Then secondly, breach of public trust. And part of that is the idea from Republicans. They say that Mayorkas lied to them when he said that the border is under operational control. Republicans did produce 5 reports in this, but there really have only been a couple of hearings. Still, Chairman of the committee, Mark Green, said this is serious.
We cannot allow this border crisis to continue. We cannot allow fentanyl to flood across our border, our criminals to waltz in undeterred. And we cannot allow a cabinet secretary with no regard for the separation of powers and the rule of law to remain in office. That is why today we present this committee with the articles of impeachment against Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
But Mayorkas, Democrats, and frankly some Republicans also say that this is political and unprecedented, impeaching a cabinet secretary. But what they say is really a policy difference. Mayorkas sent this letter in the early hours this morning where he wrote to the committee that the problems with our immigration system are not new. He said we need a legislative solution that only Congress can provide. He claimed that we failed to enforce immigration laws, and that is false. Among other things, Mayorkas says he needs resources. He needs the ability more detention capacity, among other things. The question here, Jeff, is not really how do you fix the problem at the border, it's who do you blame? This impeachment is not going to change things at the border, but the blame and what the message is at stake.
So they're accusing him of refusing to uphold the law and breaching the public's trust. On what grounds? Provide the context, please.
Right, let's look at one of the contention points here. As I mentioned, Republicans accusing the Secretary of perjury before Congress. So I want to play one of the sound bites that's at the center of that. This is an exchange that happened in 2022.
Do we have operational control, yes or no?
Yes, we do.
We have operational control of the borders.
Yes, we do. And Congressman, we are working to...
So what operational control define? In this section, the term operational control means the prevention of all unlawful entries into the United States, including entries by terrorists, other unlawful aliens, instruments of terrorism, narcotics, and other contraband. Do you stand by your testimony that we have operational control in light of this definition?
Congressman, I think the Secretary of Homeland Security would have said the same thing in 2020.
That is a definition from 2006 law. But as the Secretary is saying, it says that no one could cross the border. And what Mayorkas and the Biden White House have said is no one has ever met that standard in United States history. They instead are saying that there's a different issue here, being Donald Trump. We know, and I know from my reporting, local sources and some in the Trump universe say, yes, he does want to campaign on the border. He does not necessarily want a deal or a solution right now. So when you hear from Democrats today, as we heard from Democratic leaders, they point back to Trump.
This was never about securing the border. This was never about migrants. This was never about protecting our country. Just like the baseless impeachments and everything else that MAGA Republicans have pretended to care about, it has always been about helping Donald Trump become president again.
Republicans reject that, of course. They say there is a real issue at the border. They really think this is a dereliction of duty. But at the same time, as they're impeaching this secretary, that same secretary is trying to negotiate with other Republicans for a potential border deal on the Senate side. So you can't miss the irony.
And Lisa, what do we know about the level of illegal immigration under Secretary Mayorkas?
This is important, and it was hard to pick out just some facts, but let me present from Mayorkas' side where we are. There has been such a massive surge in numbers at the border. So let's look at 2019. We're in the Trump presidency. 1.1 million encounters that year is what DHS reported. Let's look at last year, last fiscal year, 3.2 million. So Mayorkas is saying we're cutting triply the amount of people we're seeing at the border, but they say the apprehension rate for the whole time has been 78%. We're saying we're catching up with the past despite these record numbers.